Soud, you have been actively engaged with Peaked since the first Living Lab in March 2025. As a youth worker and a social entrepreneur focused on climate change mitigation and adaptation, how did that initial experience in Petra and Wadi Rum influence your professional journey and environmental vision?
Well, for the honesty, the experience was transformative on both personal and professional level. Petra, Wadi Rum were not just a historical and natural sites. For us, they were living classrooms for climate resilience and sustainable adaptation. Honestly, in Petra, I was deeply inspired by Nabatee's systems of water harvesting and mountain resource management. Those ancient communities understood how to survive in harsh climate with limited resources, and their innovations remain relevant today as Jordan faces increasing water scarcity and climate stress. When we later climbed Jabal Dami, the highest peak in Jordan, it became a symbolic of the mountain identity concept we discussed within Peaked. I realized that mountains are not isolated landscapes. They are ecosystems that regulate water, biodiversity, and community survival. Seeing the ancient dam structures at high altitude reinforced the idea that climate adaptation is deeply rooted in our heritage. Equally impactful were the conversation with Bedouin elders at the Sultan camp. They described mountains as protectors and storytellers, and this changed my understanding of environmental work. Climate action is not only about science and technology. It is also about preserving indigenous knowledge, cultural identity, and traditional ecological practices that have enabled communities to adapt for generations. That perspective later shaped the way I approached youth engagement and social entrepreneurship projects.
You later played a leading role in the regional youth camp and the community asset mapping initiative in Soud. How did you connect those earlier lessons from Wadi Rum and Petra to community-based climate action?
The connection was very natural. In Soud, we applied the same philosophy we learned from the Bedouin communities. Every landscape and every community already possessed hidden strength and adaptive capacities. Instead of focusing on what communities lack, we focused on what they already have and how those assets can support climate resilience and green development. Through the community asset mapping process, we identified local farmers, women-led cooperatives, youth groups, and traditional agricultural knowledge as key drivers for sustainable adaptation. For example, many older farmers still use low-water agriculture techniques and seasonal planting methods that are highly relevant under changing climate conditions. Women's cooperatives were also leading innovative food preservation and eco-production initiatives with minimal waste and low environmental impact. As a social entrepreneur, I became especially interested in how these local assets could be transformed into sustainable green economic opportunities. Climate adaptation should not be treated only as an environmental necessity. It can also create livelihoods, empower youth, and strengthen local economies. We began exploring ideas around ecotourism, climate-smart agriculture, community-based conservation, and youth-led environmental enterprises. What stood out to me most was that resilience is social as much as ecological. Strong social networks, trust between community members, and intergenerational knowledge sharing are just as important as technology when facing climate change.
In April 2026, you participated in the biodiversity and ecosystem resilience activities in Deepin Forest. What were your key findings there, particularly regarding the evergreen oak ecosystem?
In Deepin Forest, I worked closely with Team 2 on documenting the ecological role of native tree species, especially the evergreen oak and carob trees. What became immediately clear is that is that these species are foundational for ecosystem stability and climate adaptation in northern Jordan. The evergreen oak plays a major role in soil stabilization, moisture retention. It creates a microhabitat that supports insects, birds, fungi, and mammals, including the Persian squirrel, which depends heavily on the forest ecosystem. Protecting these trees is therefore not only about conserving biodiversity, it is also about maintaining ecological balance and reducing the risks of desertification. From a climate mitigation perspective, forests like the bean are critical carbon sinks. From an adaptation perspective, they regulate local temperature, improve soil health, and increase ecosystem resilience against drought and extreme weather events. This reinforced for me the importance of integrating biodiversity conservation into climate strategies rather than treating them as separate issues. What made the experience especially meaningful was how it connected back to our earlier work with the women's group in LDC region. Whether we're planting Ghada trees in desert ecosystem or protecting evergreen oak forests in the north, the core mission remains the same: strengthening ecosystem resilience while empowering local communities to become active leaders in climate action.
As a young climate advocate and entrepreneur, what message would you like to share with other youth in Jordan and the region?
My message is that climate action must start locally but think globally. Young people already have the creativity, energy, and digital tools needed to drive meaningful change. However, we also need to reconnect with our environmental heritage and traditional ecological knowledge. Sustainability is not a foreign concept in our region. It has always existed in the way our ancestors managed water, agriculture, forests, and community cooperation. I believe the future lies in combining innovation with tradition. Youth can create green startups, community initiatives, digital environmental platforms, and awareness campaigns while still learning from local farmers, Bedouin communities, and indigenous practices. Climate change is one of the greatest challenges facing our generation, but is also an opportunity to build more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable societies.